A dramatic reading of Futuristic Lovers by Socrates. This was repubbed by Ringabel on his old fanfiction.net account. So, let's get started. You're so hypnotizing. Could you be the devil? Could you be an angel? I don't know. Your touch. Magnetizing. Feels like I am floating. Leave my body glowing. I couldn't help it. The first time I saw you, I couldn't look away. It was I was boarding the ship with Silver that we met, and this was the day that sealed my whole heart to only belonging to you, without me knowing it. In the beginning, it was little things that I started to become aware of. A touch on the shoulder, a pat on the back. Hands brushing unexpectedly caused my heart to speed up in pace. Little things that, as I said, I ignored it for a while, till weeks later, it was getting worse. I would get flustered around him. My heart would feel like it was beating out of my chest. My body would get warm. Then that's when the dreams would come. Right after the dreams started up, that was when it hit me like an ice-cold bucket of water. I fell in love with my own captain. I didn't know what to do with my feelings at all. I was so confused. What am I going to do now? Jim was cleaning the deck with a skip in his step, the memory from a few hours ago keeping him going for the day. It was early in the morning, and Jim was tiredly arriving on the deck from below. He was not looking forward to doing his chores that he was assigned to do. They seemed so demeaning for a man like him, but he put up with it since he was just a teenager in everyone else's mind. Pulling out the mop and bucket from their hiding places, he began his long task. Halfway through, the captain came down from the helm and just stared at him for a few minutes, then spoke up with a fond tone in his voice. "Hawkins, you're a good sailor," Dimitri commented with an offhanded smile. "Thanks, Captain," the younger of the two answered in confusion. With that, he left, going back to the helm. It might have confused him why the captain would say that, but he didn't mind that he didn't know and wouldn't know. As long as he got to get attention from the man, he would be content. "Jim!" a voice bellowed in exasperation. "What are you doing? Get your head out of the clouds, lad." Jim gave a start, then turned around to come face to face with Silver, a senior crew member. Blinking, he grinned at his friend, greeting him with a smile. "My head aren't in the clouds today, honest," he answered, with a nervous chuckle and a silly grin on his face. "Right if you say so, lad," the old sea dog grinned knowingly. Blue-eyed teen blushed and looked away and wondered to himself why the other could figure him out so easily. Was he that transparent? Ignoring that for now, he looked over at the far deck to see his captain playing chess with one of the crew members named Vlad. A small smile crossed his lips in that sense. Leaning on the broom, he couldn't help but get distracted by Dimitri, for he was extra handsome today for some reason. Without his permission, his mind started to daydream about his superior body. "You're so hypnotizing. Could you be the devil? Could you be an angel?" "Kiss me," the sailor requested to his captain shyly. "Your touch, magnetizing. Feels like I am floating. Leave my body glowing." With a soft smile on the lips, he complied, their lips meeting softly in a gentle kiss. In his mind, it felt amazing. His captain's hands snaked around his hips, pulling him closer, drawing out a small muffled moan from him. With the other's mouth wide open, the older male darted his tongue into Jim's moist cavern. "They say be afraid. You're not like the others. Futuristic lovers." Tingles ran up the younger man's spine when Dimitri kissed him down his jaw, then nibbled on his neck, drawing out moans and mewls from the other's pale throat. Hands slowly and sensually moving up under his shirt, riding up the fabric to expose pale peach skin of his waist. Different DNA. They don't understand you. Shoulders raked his body with the rough hands of his captain roaming his body. With achingly slow precision, the brown-haired man reached for his belt. "Your touch so foreign." He was jerked out of his daydream by one young woman coming on deck. She came over to Dimitri with confidence that he couldn't have, and and dragged said captain into a dance. She whispered into his ear while Jim stood at a distance with his heart aching at the sight of the two being so close to each other. He couldn't take it anymore and looked away with hurt filling his beating organ. Finishing up the task, he put his supplies away and hurried below deck to help the cook in the gallery. What he didn't see was that the captain of the ship pulled away from the young lady and walked away. A few hours later, night has fallen. You could find the emotionally hurting lad on deck again, leaning on the railing, looking out into an empty, cruel sea. Well, it was empty in his eyes, since that's how his heart felt. Lost in thought, he didn't notice a blob float over to him until the cooing started up in his ear. Jim turned his head and smiled warmly at his new arrival. Morph, hey buddy, haven't seen you around today. Been hanging around at Silver all day, huh? All he got from the pink blob was more cooing and high shrills. The smile on the young man's face slowly vanished when his thoughts wandered to the captain again. I've been having these feels lately, and I don't know what to do about them, the blue-eyed teen voiced out loud to his little friend. What should I do? I can't have these feelings for another man. He could end up hatting me if he ever found out. The small blob gave a few deep and high-pitched sounds, then cuddled up to his bigger friend. Tell him I can't morph, was his sad reply, burying his head into his hands. With that, the short conversation he was having with the pink amorphous shape was over. Another hour passed, and Jim switched locations to the rope ladders on the sides of the ship to think. But the more he thought about the older, and the more angry he got at himself for feeling this way for his superior officer. Why do I feel this way? He shouted to the empty sky, throwing the rope he was trying to knot up to the depths of the sea. There's got to be a way to make this go away. It's not right. Jim slumped into the ropes behind him. How can he ever fall in love with someone like me? He whispered to himself in defeat. In the distance he could hear thunder. Jim woke to the sound of men's shouts on the deck and violent thrashing of the ship below his feet. At first he was disoriented from sleep, but woke fully when the thunder strikes outside got louder from his ears. Hurriedly, he put his boots on and flew up the stairs of the crew members' cabins. The rain hit him like a slap in the face when he arrived. With that, he looked around to see what he could do to help. Distantly, he acknowledged that the situation could end up in disaster, but he prevailed on and started to help the other crew members, bringing the sails since they were still up. In the corner of his eye, he saw the captain supervising and helping at the same time a ways from him. But at that time, he had no room for his feels for the other man. At the time, he had to survive along with his teammates. That didn't keep him from keeping tabs on Dimitri, though. He noted that the captain climbed to the crow's nest to get one of his crew out from the situation, and a pang of admiration crept in his heart. No! He had to keep on task and save the ship from capsizing or going down the sea. No time for admiring the captain. Sadly, his distraction cost him, for a big wave from the sea came barreling across towards the ship. With a mighty wail, the wave crashed into the deck, sweeping young Jim overboard. He didn't even have time to scream or shout out in distress. Dimitri takes blind eyes to this, since he was helping keep an eye on the young lad himself without realizing. His brown eyes widened in shock. "Hawkins!" he shouted out in alarm, swinging down the rope from the crow's nest with skill, landing gracefully on the deck. He leaned in over the railing, searching for the other that fell overboard. "Captain," the teenager cried in desperation, reaching out his hand for the other man, barely hanging on for the side of the ship for dear life. With desperation of his own, he didn't know that Dimitri reached out for the overstretched hand of a young sailor. With all his might, he pulled the slight young man up and over the railing of the ship. Both were panting with exhaustion from the ordeal. Just as the horrible storm came, it died down. The rain was calming down to a drizzle. "Are you all right?" the captain asked when he caught his breath, looking at Jim's humpster form. "No," the other trailed off. Then something snapped at him. Suddenly he looked right in the captain's warm brown eyes and blurted out, "Kiss me! Infect me with your love! Fill me with your poison!" And he had no idea where that came from, but it felt good to say those things. "Take me!" he blurted out before he came back to his sense. "Sorry." Jim turned away from his captain in embarrassment. "I guess climbing close to death can make you say the silliest thing." Dimitri didn't say anything at first until he took a long breath and said, "No, you should have told me." "What difference would it have made?" the younger man whispered, his eyes tearing up in embarrassment and shame. He didn't say anything to that, but action spoke louder than word. The older man smoothly reached over and grabbed the other's hands and planted a soft kiss on the back of his hand like it was a natural thing to do, and all Jim could do is gawk in astonishment. "But it's supernatural," the young, blue-eyed man blurted out, and still in disbelief, tears finally falling down his cheeks. With a smirk, he replied, "I know." With that, he pulled the other close to him and planted a demanding kiss on young Jim Hulkin's soft lips. With a start, he thought of resisting, but then decided to give in, for this is what he wanted all along. Closing his blue eyes, he leaned into the kiss, deepening on it. "They say be afraid, but I already know he is the devil," the lad quietly thought, "but I can live with that as long as he's always looking at me." The end.